Welcome to this video about my car. I'm going to do a walk around it and then a video of a short drive. It's a 1964 Alvis TE21 convertible, or drophead coupe as they called it. I shipped it over from England in 1997 and have had it here for 13 years now. I wanted one because it's a four-seater, it has a stick shift, and you just don't see them over here. They made these cars in 4 series, TD, TD Mark II, TE and TF, and there were 95 TE dropheads, and I wouldn't be surprised if this is the only one in 2,000 miles. If there's another, I'd love to hear from you. I've blanked off the license plate because there are a lot of people on the internet who just don't know how to behave. Alvis made cars from 1920 to 1967, at which point they stopped, not least because they were making more profits on the military vehicles which, along with aircraft engines, they had been building since World War II. Interestingly, Alvis always made their own engines, but never their own bodies. So all their cars are coach-built. Alvises were always expensive, beautifully built and fast, but there was a change after World War II in that their engineering became more conservative. They were building front-wheel drive sports cars in the 1920s, and if you compare a 1930s Alvis with a benchmark like, say, the 30s Bentley, you will notice that the Alvis had a cruciform braced chassis, independent front suspension, and an all-synchronous 4-speed of Alvis's own design and manufacturer, all features lacking on the contemporary Bentley. This is basically because by then Bentleys were really Rolls-Royces and therefore technically conservative, whereas by the mid-1930s the real Bentleys were Lagondas. For the extra money, I suspect that the Bentley, if less sporting, was a little quieter and more refined, but it has to be said that Alvis were not very good at marketing and they were outsold by Bentley. After World War II, most Alvises had the 3-litre straight six, which is in this car. They were still fast, expensive and very well built, but they weren't so innovative. For example, they never built a unibody, which even Bentley did by 1965. The car side of the business seemed increasingly to be sidelined by investment in tanks, amphibious vehicles, scout cars and other things that shoot. This series of cars by Alvis was the last English car to have a coach-built body. The body on this one was made by Mulliner Park Ward, who were by then a subsidiary of Rolls-Royce, so it's a body on frame, which was old-fashioned even when the car was new. You could guess, actually, if you're clever, just by the design of the convertible top that it's a Park Ward design with that huge blind spot and that characteristic rear window shape. So while it was old-fashioned, it did leave the factory with a 5-speed ZF, 4-wheel disc brakes and a genuine dual exhaust. Not bad for 1964. So I'm going to take a break to lower the top. The interior of the Alvis is classic English, with materials sourced from cattle, sheep and trees. It's original apart from the carpets. The back seat is just how I like it, almost perfect. The front passenger seat's very good and the driver's seat has some tired looking leather on it, but the cushion isn't sagging. I have the original steering wheel in the garage, but I don't tend to use it because they are fragile. The spokes on it go straight into the wood, which tends to crack. This one I had made on an Alvis hub, and there's a ring of metal within the wood in order to take the strain of the spokes, so I can heave on it when I get in and out without worrying. The wood's good, and the paint was beautifully done in 1996 by Red Triangle in England. But after all this time, some hairline cracks in the paint are starting to appear. Frankly, it'll have to get a lot worse before I respray it. This has always been a car for driving, not a show queen. It gets polished about once a year, and I'm sorry, but I couldn't be bothered to wash it for this video. The paint is actually an original Alvis colour called Alice Blue. I don't know who Alice was, but I assume she had pretty blue eyes. So let's raise the bonnet, or what I've learnt to call the hood. Okay, so as the eagle-eyed will have spotted, I've turned the car around so that the sun is shining on the engine, which is actually nothing special to look at. It's a 3-litre overhead valve straight 6. In left-hand drive form, the compartment's looking a bit busy on the left-hand side, or the right as we look at it, with the air filters, the carbs, the exhaust and the steering column all on that side. Like the whole car, the engine is over-engineered, so it can take a lot of neglect and abuse and still keep going. Well, I did say I didn't clean the car, but actually if you look closely you can see that right there on top of the battery there's a bounce fabric softener, which is there because there was once a mouse nesting on the battery and this is supposed to discourage that. Anyway, back to the engine. It's more of a low-down torque monster than a rev screamer, which is good because once the weather starts heading beyond 90 degrees, I can go anywhere without exceeding 2,500 RPM. So she's never boiled. In fact, she's only stopped once in 1997 when the electronic ignition I had fitted, having reached the end of its warranty period, duly died. So I put the original points back in. 10 years later, I again fitted electronic ignition, but this time not an English one. So far so good. Other than that, it really has been extraordinarily reliable, though I realize I'm tempting fate making that statement. Even the Lucas Electrics have always been fine, apart from one turn signal repeater on the instrument panel, which sometimes doesn't work when the weather's cold, but the turn signal itself does work. I have a theory, which may be rubbish, that Lucas, who successfully built highly sophisticated equipment for the aerospace industry, when it came to cars built components down to a price that the manufacturer could afford. This car was expensive, so Alvis paid for decent components, whereas companies like, say, Triumph were always short of cash, and therefore struck bargains with the Prince of Darkness, which car owners subsequently paid for with short circuits, smoke, and even flames. So let's, for the real geeks of you, have a quick look at the boot or trunk, which is actually pretty spacious. Plenty of room in there for a romantic week on the continent with your loved one. A little bit of intrusion on the left from the filler pipe for the tank, and you can see there's a well drop down from the ceiling, which is for the folded hood, so from the outside it has a nice low profile. Anyway, that's enough chit-chat. Let's take it for a run, but first I have to raise the top, because my flip video is great, but if you video with the top down, the wind makes a noise on the flip like the mother of all hurricanes. But you will hear a clicking sound every time I change gear, as if the stick had a metal gate, but as you can see, it actually has a leather gate around it. It's just a ZF thing that contemporary road testers commented on. So let's close all the lids and fire her up.